There's a certain kind of man who carries a picture of reality that most people don't. He notices what sits beneath the smiles, behind the carefully chosen phrases, past the well-lit stage where romance performs. To others, everything looks pure and effortless. To him, the seams show. Freud would say that kind of vision is risky because once you learn to see unconscious motives operating under the surface, you can't unknow it. Love stops being simple. Affection stops being something you can take at face value. And this is the hard part. The world tends to punish people who point out what everyone else would rather leave unnamed. Freud once wrote that human beings are not the masters in their own house. He wasn't just talking about dreams or slips of the tongue. He meant that a great deal of what we do, especially in love, gets steered by desires and fears we don't fully recognize. So when a man begins to notice those forces in his partner's behavior, when he sees the subtle bargaining under tenderness, the envy behind praise, the irritation wrapped in "I'm fine," he finds himself standing apart. He has violated an unspoken social rule. Never call the hidden thing by its name. Picture the husband who suddenly realizes his wife's warmth appears on schedule, right after he yields on something important to him. He notices her anger isn't purely righteous, it's well-timed. He sees her silence isn't only about hurt, it also exerts pressure. Most men explain all this away. She's just sensitive. She cares a lot. But the man who looks deeper recognizes a familiar dynamic Freud described: repression. What someone won't admit in themselves shows up indirectly. A hunger for control might reappear as virtue, as caring, as standards. A fear of losing influence might masquerade as concern, not because she's plotting in a cartoonish way, but because the mind bends reality to protect itself. And now this perceptive man is in a lonely spot. If he names the pattern, he gets called harsh. If he stays quiet, he feels ruled by something he can't respect. Freud also argued that every relationship is shadowed by transference, the habit of projecting unresolved past conflicts onto the person in front of you. That doesn't make anyone a villain, it just makes us human. But it means that what looks like a fight over dinner is rarely only about dinner. A partner may be reliving the struggle to be seen by a critical parent, reenacting a rivalry learned at home, or defending against a childhood fear of abandonment. To the average spouse, these are just moods. To the man who sees more than most, it's clear he isn't only meeting his partner, he's wrestling with ghosts. And that's where things get dangerous. The moment you see that your lover isn't entirely present with you, that old scripts are driving new scenes, you can't view the relationship the old way. Yet that vision is both a curse and a relief. A curse because people who lean on unconscious maneuvers often cannot forgive the partner who stops playing along. His awareness threatens the narrative keeping everything together. A relief because once he sees the strings, he can stop dancing to them. He can step out of the routine. He can choose. Here's the paradox. Most people don't want to see. Illusions are soothing. It's comforting to believe devotion is always pure, affection always unconditional. The man who really sees loses that comfort permanently. He can't kneel at the altar of wishful thinking again. He can't submit without questions. He stands a little taller and a little more alone. Freud returned to this risk again and again. Clarity about the unconscious isolates us because society relies on a certain level of denial to keep things running. People will do almost anything to avoid confronting their own conflicted motives. He called these moves defense mechanisms, the mind's ways of dodging what feels unbearable. In relationships, defenses don't just protect the self, they can become weapons. The perceptive man notices a strange inversion in the accusations aimed at him. He's labeled selfish after months of giving. He's called unfaithful while he's been loyal. He's branded controlling for setting a simple boundary. To the untrained eye, this is maddening confusion. To Freud, it's textbook projection. What someone can't tolerate in themselves gets assigned to the nearest target. This isn't about shaming anyone, it's about recognizing how minds protect themselves. A partner who manipulates unconsciously rarely thinks of herself as manipulative. Her ego can't hold that idea without cracking. So the story flips. Secret envy becomes your arrogance. Hidden control becomes your stubbornness. Unspoken fear becomes your coldness. And now this perceptive man is stuck in a trial where the verdict was drafted long before the evidence arrived. That's the trap. The unconscious doesn't fight fair. It edits reality to avoid pain. And the man who sees that ends up in a different danger, not of being fooled, but of becoming the villain simply for noticing the trick. Freud once remarked that we are never so defenseless against suffering as when we love. For the perceptive man, that cuts twice. He loves and he sees, and the seeing hurts. He catches the hedging behind the sweet words, the calculations behind the, no really, it's fine. He can't unsee it, and yet he can't flip a switch and stop caring either. This is why so many people fold inside strained relationships. They sense the fraud, but they bury the knowledge to keep the peace. They choose the anesthesia of not knowing. The difference with the man who sees is that he can't go back to sleep, a choice that may cost him comfort, but preserves his core. And here's the hardest part. The clarity that could save him also threatens the relationship if it runs on denial. Someone who depends on unconscious tactics to maintain control will defend the mask at any cost. If he tugs it off, he becomes the problem. She won't thank him for the truth. She'll feel attacked by it. Freud called it the return of the repressed. What we refuse to face comes back not as honest confession, but as backlash. Unable to integrate the hidden motive, the mind punishes whoever illuminated it. So the perceptive man often ends up isolated. Friends say he's overthinking. Her family insists he's unkind. Culture calls him bitter. But maybe he's simply awake, taking seriously what Freud spent a lifetime mapping. Beneath every love affair, a battlefield of motives, fears, and power moves. See it clearly, and you may walk alone. Refuse to see it, and you risk becoming a casualty in a war you didn't know you were fighting. At the heart of Freud's picture of human ties are two great drives: eros, the pull toward love, union, pleasure, and thanatos, the pull toward domination, destruction, control. Most people see only eros in a tender gesture. The perceptive man recognizes that sometimes, hidden in that tenderness, a power aim is sneaking along for the ride. Not every affectionate act is born purely of eros. Some are negotiations. Some are ways to bind. Some are bids to make sure he belongs less to himself and more to the relationship. The man who wants to believe calls this devotion. He interprets possessiveness as care, jealousy as passion, control as concern. The man who sees knows better. Those are signals of narcissism, not of love at its best. And yet perception comes with a cost. Once a man recognizes these patterns, he can't return to the naive belief in unconditional devotion. He starts to hear the bargain under the romantic words, the quiet contract beneath the kiss. He understands, as Freud did, that love often blinds us to the economy beneath it, and wherever there is blindness, manipulation can thrive. The antidote isn't cynicism, it's sobriety. The perceptive man doesn't reject love, he strips it of illusion. He still desires, but he doesn't mistake desire for destiny. He still cherishes affection, but he detects when it's conditional. He can honor marriage while also spotting how easily it becomes a transaction. That clarity disarms the strongest weapon of manipulation, idealization. When he stops idolizing, the games lose power. They're revealed as what they are, moves in a contest for control. But now a heavier burden arrives. Most men, when they brush up against manipulation, choose denial. She means well. All relationships are like this. They trade freedom for the comfort of the story. The man who really sees can't do that anymore. He feels the strings on his back even when he tries to ignore them, which puts him at a crossroads no one envies. Keep silent and live small, or speak up and trigger conflict. One path erodes dignity, the other risks isolation. This, Freud would say, is the core danger. If you don't recognize the unconscious pattern, you're sentenced to act inside it. The rerun continues. Today you play the abandoning father, tomorrow the rival, next week the betrayer. Freud put it sharply, the compulsion to repeat often replaces the impulse to remember. Translation: people reenact what they can't face. If a partner can't look directly at old wounds, those wounds sneak in through the side door and script the present. So the perceptive man faces a decisive moment. Do I keep acting in someone else's unresolved play, or do I step off the stage? Neither option is painless. One costs him his individuality, the other costs him the illusion of harmony. But only one choice gives him his life back. The moment he chooses freedom, another discovery arrives, a quiet one, heavier than it sounds. Solitude, though weighty, is lighter than servitude to someone else's unconscious. That doesn't mean he swears off love forever or grows hard and cynical. It means he refuses roles that erase him. He'll collaborate, but not submit to a script written by denial. He'll care, but not at the price of self-betrayal. This is maturity in Freud's sense, to stand in reality rather than lean on comforting myths. Freud also argued that civilization itself depends on a certain level of illusion. We sand down our rough edges to get along. We agree, politely, to ignore much of what churns beneath the surface. That compromise keeps traffic moving and dinner parties civil, but it becomes most volatile at home. Relationships shoulder the heaviest load of these social fantasies. Culture rewards the couple that performs harmony, even when the backstage is on fire, and especially praises men who keep the show going by absorbing the cost. So when a man starts telling the truth, not with cruelty, but with clarity, this feels transactional. Your affection tracks my usefulness. You punish my independence. He isn't merely critiquing a relationship. He's challenging an entire ecosystem that runs on denial. That's why the pushback is fierce. He'll be told, all couples have problems, just compromise more. He'll be scolded, your job is to keep her happy. Institutions that depend on sacrifice will declare him selfish for questioning the script that keeps them stable. So the labeling follows fast: cynical, toxic, unfeeling. Not because he's wrong, but because he refuses to be blind on command. Freud would shrug. Repression is the glue of culture. If everyone looked squarely at envy, lust, status hunger, and the urge to dominate, social order would wobble. So society prefers masks, and anyone who peeks behind them becomes a problem. The perceptive man, by naming the power plays that masquerade as romance, disrupts a comfortable storyline, and the system defends the story. That's why perceptive men so often wind up alone for a while. Not because they hate love, but because they step out of arrangements that were never love in the first place. Marriages may collapse. Friend groups may take sides. He may be mistaken for bitter when he's simply done with make-believe. Yet exile carries a strange power. The man who stops pretending gains something irreplaceable: sovereignty.
He becomes answerable to the truth he sees, not to the applause he used to chase. This freedom is expensive. He might walk without a crowd. He might be misunderstood. But solitude here isn't emptiness, it's authorship. He no longer trades his mission for the optics of being a good partner. He stops bargaining away his instincts to avoid awkward dinners. He refuses the small daily betrayals that keep an image afloat and a soul underwater. It's not that he won't compromise, he will, generously, when the exchange is honest. He simply won't mortgage his self-respect to maintain a lie. Freud warned that what we repress doesn't vanish, it returns in disguise. In intimacy, the disguise is often manipulation. A partner who cannot admit a hunger for control will rename it care. "I just want what's best for us," she says, when the hidden clause reads, "on my terms." Jealousy gets rebranded as passion. Surveillance becomes concern. To someone who wants the fairy tale, those lines sound romantic. To the man who's learned to listen underneath, the pattern is clear. Repression talking through a pretty mask. But the deeper danger isn't that he's being deceived, it's that she's deceiving herself. Freud's point was never that people wake up scheming to hurt each other. Often they sincerely believe they're loving well. They just can't see how anger, withdrawal, or guilt trips function as leverage. So when the perceptive man declines to obey those cues, she experiences it as betrayal. In her story, she's devoted. He's turned cold. In his vision, he's setting an adult boundary. That collision threatens a fragile identity, and the backlash can be loud. Enter emotional blackmail. Many men, conflict-averse, fold quickly when tears fall or silence stretches. They surrender to make the room feel safe again. And yes, sometimes tears are truth, and silence is honest hurt. But sometimes they're tools, old instruments pulled off the shelf to bring a partner back into line. The man who sees learns to tell the difference. He starts sorting signal from noise. He discovers that not every storm requires him to abandon his post. The leash that once tugged him around goes slack. That newfound steadiness is exactly what makes him dangerous to manipulation. Guilt no longer switches him off. Accusations don't automatically turn him into a defendant. He can care deeply without making fear-based promises. He can love without forfeiting the right to say no. His strength isn't in harshness, it's in refusing to buy peace with self-betrayal. And yes, there's a price. Someone who relied on those tactics will feel exposed when they stop working. If the mask cracks, the first response rarely sounds like gratitude. Freud had a phrase for the wound that follows: narcissistic injury. When a carefully curated self-image is threatened, the ego fights back. Sometimes with rage, sometimes with tears, sometimes with a campaign to recruit allies. The partner who felt in control may suddenly feel endangered. She may retell the relationship with herself as the wounded saint and him as the cold oppressor. She may escalate socially, financially, emotionally to punish the man who refused to keep her illusion intact. From the outside, it can look convincing. People who didn't live the day-to-day will side with the neatest story. That's why the perceptive man must learn a hard discipline. Resist the urge to over-explain. When narcissistic injury is active, reason isn't in charge. Defense is. He won't logic someone out of a panic that exists to protect their identity. His task isn't to win a debate, it's to keep his footing. Most men crumble here, hungry for approval and exhausted by the storm. The man who sees treats the storm as weather, loud, painful, passing. If he holds steady through the smear and the fury, he discovers a quiet truth. The intensity reveals the depth of the illusion he refused to carry. He didn't create anyone's shadow, he simply stopped volunteering to hold it. And when the noise finally fades, something solid remains. He is harder to fool, by others and by himself. He understands that you can lose the applause of a crowd and still keep the one thing you can't live without, your own respect. Freud's line about freedom is worth repeating. It doesn't come from escaping desire, but from understanding it. Men who never look under the hood end up captive to what they won't name. They marry blindly, serve loyally, and suffer quietly, calling it maturity while wondering why they feel hollow. The man who sees has crossed a threshold. He's paid the price: projections, punishments, even the blast of narcissistic injury. If he survives, he changes. He becomes someone who chooses relationships instead of enduring them. He's no longer hypnotized by beauty, tugged around by fear, or yoked by guilt. He hears the subtext in every exchange, not to weaponize it, but to navigate it. When a partner tries to bind him with silence, he names it without cruelty. When blame flips reality upside down, he refuses the costume. When his independence triggers punishment, he recognizes the fear beneath it and declines to negotiate his dignity. His no is not meanness, it's mental health. His yes is not appeasement, it's a choice made.
Freud believed that a lot of adult love is staged on a set built in childhood. He pointed to the Oedipal tangle, not to scandalize, but to show how desire, rivalry, approval, and shame get woven together early and then quietly exported into adult life. That's how a partner can slide into a parental role without meaning to. She rewards obedience with affection, punishes independence with distance, and scolds the very qualities she once admired. The blind man calls this normal. The perceptive man recognizes a rerun. Once he names it, the energy shifts. "You're relating to me like a child, not a partner," he says, calmly, specifically, without theatrics. That statement doesn't just describe behavior, it drags a shadow into daylight. If her sense of self leans on being the righteous caretaker, she will likely tighten her grip before she loosens it. "You're irresponsible, you're ungrateful, you need guidance." Translation: stay small so this dynamic keeps me feeling safe. The man who sees declines the invitation. He withdraws his dependency, not his warmth. He stops asking for permission to be himself. He stops trading compliance for touches of affection. He stops apologizing for having a spine. And predictably, the tactics sharpen. Longer silences, harsher labels, new stories told to friends and family. The goal is simple: make him doubt his own reality so he steps back into his old role. In that crucial window, self-trust is everything. He keeps his footing by checking facts, not moods. Freud would call this a pivot from neurotic repetition to reality testing. Instead of reenacting the past, he tests the present. What is actually being asked of him? What boundary is actually being crossed? What story is he being cast into again? That kind of clarity is not flashy. It sounds like, "I'm happy to talk when we're both calm," or "I won't accept being called names," or "affection shouldn't depend on me giving in." Short sentences, clean edges, no speeches. He chooses behavior that makes tomorrow better, not theatrics that make tonight feel righteous. Now, does this mean he should write people off at the first sign of projection or control? No. Remember, all of us bring defenses into love. The line is not flawless or nothing. The line is honesty and repair. Can she acknowledge when she's projecting? Can she own power plays when they surface? Can she tolerate his boundaries without making him the villain? If the answer is yes, even imperfectly,
there's room to grow together. If the answer is no, the relationship becomes a museum of old pain. This is where practical guidance helps. First, he needs a few non-negotiable boundaries, ones tied to actions, not feelings. For example, I don't stay in conversations where I'm being insulted. I don't accept surveillance disguised as concern. I don't negotiate under threats of withholding affection. Second, he needs a plan for rupture and repair. Pause early, cool off, return with specifics, request a single change at a time, and offer one of his own in good faith. Third, he needs allies who value truth more than drama. And yes, therapy can matter here, not as punishment or a proof of superiority, but as a neutral room where defenses are noticed, named, and set down. A good clinician will track the cycle: trigger, defense, projection, punishment, compliance. Once the cycle is mapped, both partners can choose new moves. Sometimes the relationship grows. Sometimes the newfound honesty reveals an incompatibility that was always there. Either outcome is progress, because reality, Freud would insist, is kinder than illusion in the long run. Let's talk selection, because the perceptive man eventually learns to choose better, not just fight better. He doesn't confuse intensity for compatibility. He doesn't mistake constant contact for care. He watches how a woman handles no, how she treats a boundary, how she narrates X's and conflicts. He values accountability over charm. He listens for whether we always collapses into me. He pays attention to whether affection evaporates when he pursues his mission. If Eros is present, but Thanatos drives the steering wheel, he steps away early. He also watches himself. The desire to be needed can recruit him into bad deals. The urge to fix can trap him in roles that inflate his ego while draining his life. So he keeps a simple self-audit. Am I telling the truth faster? Are my standards visible in my schedule? Do I respect myself after we resolve conflict? Do I still have time and energy for my work, my health, my friends? If the answers decay over time, he doesn't debate it for months, he adjusts or exits. Now, none of this requires demonizing women. The project is not to build a case against half the human race, it's to see the human tendencies that show up in all of us and refuse their worst forms. Women can love profoundly and manipulate fiercely. Men can protect fiercely and also collude in their own subjugation. The point is not to hate. The point is to differentiate. I see you, I care about you, and I will not disappear to keep you comfortable. That's not cruelty. That's adulthood. Freud's twin drives, Eros and Thanatos, don't cancel each other out. They compete. Healthy love keeps Eros in charge and gives Thanatos a job it can't ruin: structure, clarity, boundaries. I'm for us, Eros, lives alongside, and I won't be swallowed. Thanatos contained. In practice, that looks like transparent expectations, explicit consent around resources and time, a shared commitment to reality checks and regular inventory. What's working? What's not? Where are we drifting into old plays? That rhythm keeps love alive and power games bored. Now, what about community? The perceptive man needs one. Sovereignty doesn't mean isolation forever. After the necessary season of clarity and cleanup, he builds a circle where truth is normal. Men who can say, "You're slipping into appeasement," or "You're projecting blame right now," without shaming. Friends who celebrate boundaries the way other people celebrate anniversaries. Mentors who remind him that kindness and backbone belong in the same body. With that support, he can be tender without being tamed. And the feminine that can stand beside him, she exists. She welcomes his boundaries because she has her own. She can say, "That landed like control. I'll rephrase," and mean it. She can ask for reassurance without extracting obedience. She can disagree without punishing. She can love his mission because she has a mission too. In that pairing, intimacy isn't a custody battle over each other's freedom. It's a collaboration that makes both more alive. Eros leads, Thanatos stays on a leash. Still, even with the right partner, the inner work never ends. He keeps an eye on his own defenses, the urge to withdraw instead of speak, the temptation to win instead of understand, the pride that would rather be right than connected. He remembers that projection is a two-way street and checks his mirrors before he accuses. He apologizes precisely and early. He asks for what he needs without turning it into a moral trial. He lets love be real, messy, negotiated, luminous, without making it an altar where he sacrifices himself. Eventually, the reward of all this clarity shows up not as a victory lap, but as peace. He no longer startles at every mood change. He no longer bargains with guilt. He no longer needs the relationship to prove his worth, because his life already does that, through work, through craft, through service, through friendships, through the quiet competence of a man who tells the truth and keeps promises. He's not above love. He's simply free enough to love on purpose. Freud once joked that the aim of analysis was to trade neurotic misery for ordinary unhappiness. Not exactly a Hallmark card, but there's a useful echo here. The perceptive man trades the thrilling roller coaster of manipulation for the steadier mode of freedom. It's less dramatic, more demanding, and infinitely more dignified. He may lose the applause of those who prefer the fantasy, but he gains the only cheer that matters, the one inside when he looks in the mirror. So, if you're that man, or becoming him, remember this: seeing is costly, and it's worth it. You'll be called names for breaking the script. You'll be tempted to go back to sleep. Don't. Keep choosing clarity over comfort, boundaries over blackmail, partnership over performance. Let Eros breathe, leash Thanatos, and build a life that doesn't depend on anyone else's blindness to stay intact. Because once you've seen, your task isn't to unsee, it's to live in a way that honors what you now know. If this resonated and helped you stand a little taller, do the simple things that keep this work going. Like, share, add your story below, and check the links in the description to support the channel.